Well, good day to you people. If you need to take the notes on the Islamic empires, this is the video for you. So let's do this very, very fast. Here is the multi-tier timeline. As you can see, what's going on in the Byzantine world from 476 to 1453. These are the things that were happening in the Islamic Empire from 476 to 1453, and actually extends a little past that to 1918. And so what we're really focusing on here in that timeline is the birth of Muhammad and the growth of Islam. And if you can see it there around 661, there was the Sunni Shia split. That's the major split and division between Islam. But our big focus here is to focus on the empires that would adopt Islam as their religious entity or their religion within their government and their culture. And that would be, and there's more to it than just this, but I wanted to highlight the Umayyads, the Abbasids, the Seljuks, and the Ottomans. So refer to page 2 in your notes and make sure that's filled in. Another thing the state of Ohio wants us to connect is how do the religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam have similarities and a connection? And sometimes is referred to the monotheistic religions of Abraham, a patriarch that is recorded in the 3 holy texts for these religions. In Judaism, it's recorded in the Torah. Abraham received the covenant from God, and from him will come the son Isaac, and from Isaac, his son Jacob, whose name is changed to Israel, who eventually will have a descendant by the name of Moses, who will write all this information down in a law. Eventually, this law is adopted by the nation of Israel, which one of their kings was David, and from David's family line will come Jesus. And so now we have Judaism and Christianity. If you go to Abraham's other son named Ishmael, from that line will come the Arabic people, and from that line will come eventually Muhammad. And so that is how it all connects back to Abraham. The 7th grade, another thing the state of Ohio wants us to focus on is the Islamic empires. Last year you covered in 6th grade the religion of Islam. It begins with Muhammad. He receives the revelations from Gabriel. He writes these revelations down, or his revelations are written down, and when you compile those writings, it's known as the Quran, the holy book of Islam. Eventually, this idea would spread through Arabia, as you can see in the map there, and it was adopted by various empires that were Arabic-based. At least the first 2 were. After that, the collection of Muslim believers, the Ummah, eventually breaks down into various ethnic groups, and we're going to focus on the Turks in particular. So the first group is the Umayyads, and by their leadership, we're going to see the empire grow to its furthest extent, really, going from all the way from Spain up to India. All right, and so that's a very large territory, all controlled by the Umayyad Empire, and you can see that there. Again, they are Arab-based people group. That's one reason why the Arabic language becomes a common language religiously and also with the government. Okay, so the next thing that happens underneath the Patriarch Caliphates and the Umayyad Caliphate is that one of the 2 things that happen is that they will bump into the Byzantines, and the Battle of Yarmouk is very important because they'll take away significant territory from the Byzantine Empire within the Middle East. They actually extend into Europe, and Christian Western medieval Europe is also affected by the Islamic empires. They're successful in taking Spain for about 300 years. They almost got into France, but they were stopped at a battle called the Battle of Tours, and that was the Christian forces, the medieval Western European forces, were led by the Franks, one guy in particular named Charles Martel. He would be the grandfather of Charlemagne. After the Umayyads comes the next empire, which is known as the Abbasids. The Abbasids kind of played on this. The Umayyads kind of dominated with the Arab culture, but not everybody within the Muslim believer world was Arab, and so they kind of wanted more representation and more equality within the Ummah, and the Abbasids played on that, and they were able to wrest power away from the Umayyads and take over, promising more equality. It lasted for about 250 years, and then their empire starts to disintegrate and starts to break down in various different ethnic groups of Muslims, of which we're going to focus on one in particular, the Turks. So there's other Islamic empires that start to develop: the Moors, the Berbers, within Persia, some of the Ilkhan, the Fatimids out of Egypt. But specifically, I want to focus on the Turks. The Turks are eventually going to become a powerful group. They are nomads. They were actually hired by the Muslim forces to be a part of their cavalry, and then eventually they convert to Islam. And as a result of this, they start taking around the territory, which is modern-day Turkey, hence the name Turks, Turkey. There's a connection there, which was back then called Anatolia. So they took that away from the Byzantines, and they start to actually tiptoe onto the capital, Constantinople, and they could have very well have taken the capital had it not been attacked by two groups of people. The Crusades happen, and so they're attacked by Western European forces, and they're also attacked by the Mongols in the 1200s. And the Mongols actually pretty much decimate and destroy the Seljuk Turks, and they're never able to recover. But the Turkish people will recover underneath the leadership of a new guy by the name of Osman. And if you follow Osman, you are an Ottoman. So the Ottoman Turks are the ones who are going to be have success against the Byzantines. The last group we're going to talk about are the Ottomans. So the Ottomans are able to finally get into what is the Balkan Peninsula, surround Constantinople, as you can see in that map there. And May 30th, 1453, took almost 100 cannons and surrounded the city and pulverized it, and were able to take it and rename the city Istanbul. And that was underneath the leadership of Mehmed II. And so the Byzantine Empire comes to an end. Rome is finally done. Rome, the Byzantine Rome 2.0, if you will. All right, so the Ottomans were the ones that successfully took over. Their empire would last all the way up to World War I, and eventually they would morph into modern-day Turkey, and so they are still in existence to this day. Finally, we conclude your notes with this slide. What were some of the achievements of the Islamic Empire? Please make sure that you write this down, and this is also going to be discussed more in detail in Module Q3 4.2, the achievements of the Islamic Empire. But with one thing you want to talk about is the common law that's going to kind of be created within the Islamic Empire. Because they're all on the same page, religiously speaking, and they all recognize the same religious texts, specifically the Quran and eventually the Hadith. Recognizing those things puts them all on the same page of how they're supposed to operate with regards to law. So this is one term that you might hear sometimes. It's called Sharia law. Sharia law is using the Quran to base some of your laws on how you're going to what you think is right and wrong, and it could be a crime. So that's a common thing that would happen throughout the Middle East at that point in time. It also allows for various religious tolerations, even though the people who might not be Muslim might have to pay an extra tax. That's called a dhimmi status. But nevertheless, you could still practice, specifically Judaism and Christianity. Some of the other religions were not allowed, but those two were allowed. They also help to promote math and sciences, which that one module I talked about will have in there. And you'll see some other achievements. Musically speaking, they help to give birth to the instrument, the guitar, or kitar. And I appreciate that as a guitarist, and also like the game chess and poetry and art. So there's a lot of things that are going to provide for the West when it comes to these things: books, learning, science, technology, math, medicine, things that they would pass on to the Byzantine world, and as well as Western Europe, which would eventually help bring it out of their quote-unquote dark age, if you will, and into the medieval period. So that is it. Make sure all these notes are taken down and have them filled in. Please read them over because I went over them quickly. Have a good day, and I'll talk to you later.